How much has the president achieved so far? Donald Trump came into office promising to change the face of American politics and transfer power back to the people. After 4 weeks in the White House, he said incredible progress had been made, having signed some 24 executive actions and put his signature to several bills. But he has also been forced to fire his scandal-hit National Security Advisor and an acting Attorney General, who defied his 7-nation travel ban, which later suffered an appeals court defeat. So what has President Trump achieved so far? In the weeks and months to come, we'll be tracking the progress he makes on his agenda and how it is received by the American public. One way President Trump is able to exercise political power is through unilateral executive orders and memoranda, which allow him to bypass the legislative process in Congress in certain policy areas. He wasted little time in taking advantage of this, moving to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, cut business regulations and push ahead with the construction of 2 controversial pipelines. While it may appear that he has been signing executive actions at an unprecedented rate, he has signed less than President Obama did during the same period in effect. President Trump has used several of these actions to deliver on some of his campaign promises, but many of his promises cannot be fulfilled by executive action alone. For example, his first executive order was designed to limit the effect of the Affordable Care Act, better known as Obamacare, but his promise of repealing and replacing it can only be enacted by Congress. When Mr. Trump took the oath of office on 20th of January, he did so with the lowest approval rating of any incoming president. He dismissed those polls as rigged, but the strength of the opposition to him was evident when hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets the day after his inauguration. Most presidents begin their term with strong approval numbers, but President Trump has bucked that trend. While both George W. Bush and Barack Obama were enjoying approval numbers around 60% after 2 months in office, Mr. Trump is around the 40% mark. Mr. Trump won the election with low approval numbers, so it's unsurprising they're still low, but the scandal over his team's contacts with Russia and his controversial travel ban have kept them falling. Still, Mr. Trump's attempts to cut business regulation and his hardline on immigration have impressed many of his supporters. We spoke to some who said he was doing a fabulous job. Do his approval numbers matter? Maybe not, for now. Republicans control both the House and Senate, so in theory he can pursue his legislative agenda without worrying about his ratings, as long as he keeps his Republican colleagues on side. But if his ratings stay low or fall further, expect some dissenting voices to emerge in the party as Republicans start to worry about midterm elections in 2018. Healthcare was always going to be an early test for President Trump and the Republican Party. President Obama's Affordable Care Act helped more than 20 million previously uninsured Americans to finally get health cover, but Mr. Trump said he would act quickly to repeal and replace it. Republicans eventually unveiled their long-awaited draft healthcare bill at the beginning of March, with House Speaker Paul Ryan praising it as monumental, exciting conservative reform. President Trump backed the bill, but it quickly received a damning assessment by the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, a nonpartisan group of budget analysts and economists. The CBO analysis suggested that an estimated 14 million people would lose their insurance coverage in 2018 under the Republican plan, and that number would rise to 24 million by 2026. Healthcare was always going to be an early test for President Trump and the Republican Party. President Obama's Affordable Care Act helped more than 20 million previously uninsured Americans to finally get health cover, but Mr. Trump said he would act quickly to repeal and replace it. Republicans eventually unveiled their long-awaited draft health care bill at the beginning of March, with House Speaker Paul Ryan praising it as monumental, exciting conservative reform. President Trump backed the bill, but it quickly received a damning assessment by the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, a nonpartisan group of budget analysts and economists. The CBO analysis suggested that an estimated 14 million people would lose their insurance coverage in 2018 under the Republican plan, and that number would rise to 24 million by 2026. Despite President Trump's initial backing, he has suggested it may face some changes before it is passed, saying the legislation was now open for review and negotiation. Obamacare has faced several problems since it was introduced in 2010, and premium hikes in 2016 helped the Republicans frame it as a failure during the election campaign. Several recent polls have suggested that support for the scheme is actually growing. When Barack Obama became president in 2009, the U.S. was in the midst of its worst recession since the 1930s, with the economy shedding 800,000 jobs in his first month. But after a few dips later that year, the U.S. economy saw its longest ever period of job creation. In total, 11.3 million jobs were created under President Obama. Mr. Trump has previously dismissed those numbers as phony, and after his inauguration he described the economy as a mess. But when the new monthly report was released in March, showing 235,000 jobs had been added to the workforce in February, White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said it was great news for American workers. During the campaign, Mr. Trump vowed to create 25 million jobs over 10 years and become the greatest jobs president ever. He also accused Mexico and China of stealing millions of jobs and vowed to bring our jobs home. But research suggests most of the manufacturing jobs that America has shed in recent years have been lost to increased automation at factories, rather than companies moving abroad. We'll be keeping track of the monthly jobs report to see what progress he makes, and will also be paying close attention to the manufacturing industry. In the short term, however, President Trump has cited the stock market as a sign that his policies are already having an effect on the economy, saying there has been a tremendous surge of optimism in the business world. The Dow, S&P 500 and Nasdaq indexes all closed at record highs on 15th of February, in a partial sign at least that investors were encouraged by Mr. Trump's planned infrastructure projects, deregulation and tax cuts. But the president will need to avoid the backlash that followed his ban on immigrants coming into the U.S. from 7 mainly Muslim countries if he wants the stock market to continue hitting new highs. All of the 3 major indexes fell slightly after Mr. Trump's controversial executive order caused protests at airports across the country, and Silicon Valley lashed out at the president as well. Immigration was President Trump's signature issue during the election campaign, and he has signed a number of executive orders designed to fulfill his promises. One of his first orders declared that the U.S. would build a physical wall or similar impassable physical barrier, to the delight of all of those Americans who spent 2016 chanting, "Build the wall." It remains to be seen how Mr. Trump will pay it, although he has repeatedly insisted that the U.S. will recoup the costs from the Mexican government, despite their leaders saying otherwise. There is already some 650 miles of fencing along the border, but we'll monitor what progress President Trump makes in turning it into what he has called the Great Wall.